Hey everyone, for Victims and Villains, as well as Abyss Gazing. My name is Josh. I am one of the three hosts of Abyss Gazing, our horror podcast here at Victims and Villains. We had the chance to sit down with Matt Mercer, actor, producer, editor, Josh Ethier on the film, Jimmy and Stiggs. Now, the general consensus for us, we're going to kind of just give you guys a brief uh, review real quick, just kind of talking amongst us. We all three of us really liked this film. We're going to go ahead and give it a 3.5. It's a really strong extraterrestrial splatterhouse punk aesthetic that really has an identity of its own, not just from a visual sense, but also from a film sense. It is one of the most unique sci-fi horror films that any of us at Abyss Gazing have come across. I'm sorry there's not a longer review. All of us kind of had crazy schedules over the last couple of weeks, but we wanted to get this review out to you guys, and rather this interview, and we hope you guys enjoy this. If you guys are interested in checking out Jamie and Stiggs, it is currently playing in limited release. We'll provide links for you guys in the show notes below where you guys can check that out. So I got to ask, I am kind of curious, this movie, we live in now a post-COVID world, and you're still seeing some of these smaller projects that just kind of come out of that. And this movie is very small in times. It's a single location. It's a very small cast. Is this a COVID project?
It definitely started life as one.
Okay, that's fair.
We started shooting about a week after we could first get a shot out here in LA. Matt lives about a quarter mile from me. Joe lives at like another quarter mile in the other direction. So we already had like a little COVID bubble going where we were still watching horror movies and eating pizza all the time. And so Joe was seeing a lot of films that were being made during the COVID pandemic, where it was like, lots of folks on Zoom or with digital cameras or iPhones and stuff like that. And he was like, oh, well, I have a 16 millimeter camera, 2 of them in my house. And one of my best friends is a camera tech at a rental house. I know my DP. My editor lives a half mile down the road. Like, I could try to make something, and I wouldn't have to do it in that smaller way. I could, make it contain film, but I could shoot it on film and have like practical effects and all that stuff. So that was the genesis of the whole idea. And then he started writing it and ended up asking Matt to star in it with him, and then we were off 4.5 years ago. So it took a while.
Yeah. It did start as a pandemic project, and it was we did have a schedule in the beginning, which was a 9-week shoot. And which is long, but we were trying to build in enough time to do all the effects ourselves because our crew was 5-6 people on any given day. And then, it didn't quite get finished. We had some effects pickups to do still, but we all went off, and Joe and Josh went and made another movie called Christmas Bloody Christmas, which is a much bigger and expansive, had a much bigger budget, bigger movie. And I went off and produced another movie called The Dead Thing. And then we reconvened. And by the time we reconvened, I think, Josh Ethier had cut some of the movie together, and we realized there were ways to punch it up even more and add even more stuff. So nights and weekends for another 2.5, 3 years, we just kept adding things, and it became a marathon that obviously has ultimately been very rewarding.
Yeah, Joe would watch the scenes that we had put together, and he would like dream up new camera shots, because also he's living on set. The whole movie was shot in his apartment. So as we moved around the house, changing this room for that room, move the camera stuff over here, move all the food and the beverage stuff into here, and like this is like the one room where everyone can stand and eat food like while we're on lunch. Like while we were doing all that, he would think up different ideas for some of those older scenes, and he would go, okay, like when we go back to shoot this scene, I'm going to get a pickup for this scene that we had already shot earlier, or maybe 1 or 2 pickups, or maybe he just wanted to do it differently now because we had the other shots around it. It was like very much like a live process, whereas normally production is like almost like a checklist. You go down, you like shot. Like, we got this stuff. This one was more like we shot it. We're going to shoot something else, but now I'm watching what I've shot. And he would go, oh, I can make this a little bit better, or I can do a little bit better as an actor, or there's like a cooler camera move, or like that effect could be better, or like there could be more, light gags or blood gags, whatever they were. So it was like a really unique opportunity to get a chance to really dig in in a way that wouldn't normally be possible in a film where you have 30 to 40 people every day showing up at a set time and a set place with set goals in mind.
The set, I saw Christmas Bloody Christmas, and the set looked very familiar. Were there scenes in the other movie that were taped in that same apartment?
No, it's just funny. That's Joe wants all of the movies that he makes since Bliss to look like where he lives. So he literally lives with like neon everywhere, like strange underlighting, and he paints them all strange colors, and he hangs up all this different art and stuff. So it's not like he wants to live on one of his sets. It's that he wants his sets to look like, you know, he tries to make his whole life look like that. It's pretty admirable for a creative.
Yeah, we were watching it, and I messaged Josh and Billy. I was like, I think this is the same set from Christmas Bloody Christmas.
Yeah, it's like Joe wants all of his films and his own apartment to look like that opening scene of Batman and Robin, where it's like everything is neon green and like covered in weird slime and, you know, strange shadows and harsh blues and oranges and stuff. So that's fully what his apartment still looks like to this day.
Yeah, definitely some of the same lights were used on both movies.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask about the neon and all that, if that was something you started with on purpose or if that's something you went into later, because that actually worked great for this movie by using all the bright colors and all.
I think it's just Joe was such a fan of music videos in the 90s and the type of culture that was in the 90s when he was a kid. So, you know, like watching those Batman movies or watching like Soundgarden videos, and everything is stretched and everything is saturated and everything is weird and everything is cool. And I think he seeks to, you know, bring that to his films.
Yeah, it was definitely intentional. Like that's his aesthetic. That's the world in, you know, that's the world. That's his filter. That's the world he lives in his head. So it's always black lights, making things leap off the screen. I mean, even when we were testing blood for the aliens, you know, we ended up with this day glow orange stuff. Joe was like, I really want it to pop under a black light. So we tested all these different colors, and he really liked the orange because it looked like the magma, the melted metal at the end of T2. Like that was the main reason we used that paint.
And we had tried a similar effect in VFW where he wanted the veins on the punks' faces to be like if you held up a black light, you would see their faces streak. And I know he was never really happy about how the digital cameras could capture that effect. So since we were shooting on film, it feels like after that he's always got black light effects and neon.
Yeah.
And, you know, mixing day glow colors into blood and mixing day glow colors into paint, and, you know, accenting walls like in Tori's record shop in my Christmas Bloody Christmas. So it's just something that he just wants to explore visually and still bring to it. And honestly, there's not a lot of stuff out there that looks like it, and he pushes it as hard as he can. So I think it's cool that he has a visual stamp.
Yeah, it's very unique, and I think it makes this movie pop out a lot against other invasion movies or kind of those like psychedelic drug movies. It's this beautiful blend of kind of both, and it almost kind of feels like it's this strange amalgamation between a 70s grindhouse movie but also pulling from Close Encounters of the Third Kind and E.T. and some of those like more earlier Spielbergian types of films.
It's definitely a lot of Fire in the Sky. That's like one of Joe's favorite movies, which we completely ripped off when we did Almost Human. In fact, when we were editing that movie together, we hadn't shot the abduction sequences together yet. So we took all the sequences that were supposed to be me on a lab table being like operated on as an abductee, and we temped it all with Fire in the Sky because we both love that movie. So I think Joe is just circling back around to being like, oh no, I got to really make a proper alien movie. And that's also a lot of the impetus for this.
Well, I am kind of curious with that and some of the visual styles. Obviously, the aliens are this is a practical effect driven film. So, can you guys talk about the process of creating a definitive look for the alien? Because I know that Matt had kind of talked about the evolution, and Josh, you've also kind of hinted at as well that this was an ongoing process for several years. So, I'm also kind of curious if the character design of the extraterrestrials also kind of developed with that.
Well, I mean, if you think about it one way, it's almost like if movies kind of like if somebody was having a psychotic break while watching Unsolved Mysteries. which is sort of Joe's whole vibe as a human.
That's the best aesthetic breakdown I've heard.
Yeah. So like, Joe and I, we went to Telluride Horror Show in Colorado a couple of years ago, and we like rolled into town. It was really late. All the bars are closed. The restaurants are closed. Like, what are we gonna do? So we're just like smoke some weed and watch Unsolved Mysteries. And it's just like, it's just what he every day on set that we were having lunch, he would put on either Beavis and Butthead or Unsolved Mysteries or Beyond Belief, Fact or Fiction. And that's just, and it was just born. I think that's why he wanted the aliens to look the way they do, because he grew up on those shows that featured like the gray aliens. And then of course there's the famous alien autopsy tape that, you know, in the movie he makes reference to it. Stan Winston couldn't decide how it was faked, and that was like a very classic gray alien with a small body and a big head and the almond eyes. So he passed that along to our designers, Josh and Sierra Russell at Russell Effects, and they thought it was awesome. They were like, that's cool, we'll get to do the classic gray, and we're just gonna take that and try to build. They thought they were going to build like 2 or 3 of these things, and they ended up building like 14 of them, because ones would have like floppy arms, other ones would have, you know, rigid arms, so that you could like sort of pose them in a way or wrap them around Joe's neck. Joe even built one that had like a claw hand that he used like a robot toy online that he bought off of Amazon and then wrapped the skin back around. So yeah, it was the whole impetus for it was the classic gray alien sort of like floating in the distance somewhere. It's like abducting farmers, you know. Joe was like, why can't it happen in LA to like a filmmaker who's also a cokehead? You know?
Yeah.
I mean, with it taking place in that kind of area, I'm surprised I didn't make any reference to the Battle of LA.
I think at one point it was supposed to be, wasn't it, Matt? Wasn't there something about, there was a whole section where he was going over LA abductions, and I think he slowly worked it out. And now it's just like one shot of a laptop screen with him searching, you know, alien abductions, Los Angeles. But,
yeah, I totally forgot about that, but it was there. Yeah, there were early, when Joe was writing it, he was trying to make a decision on how much other people in LA had seen this, or other people in LA had this experience. And I guess in the montage, yeah, it kind of got boiled down to like Los Angeles alien abductions. At the beginning of the montage, you see him typing that in like macro close up, but then everyone being interviewed, any exterior shot, including Josh's, was in LA. So you kind of have to assume he's researching Los Angeles alien abductions. Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of it's shot in like a first person aspect, which really works for this movie. What made you decide to kind of shoot it like that?
Well, Joe loves POV rigs. And I think one thing that he is sort of bummed out about is that as things have gotten easier to do digitally, a lot of that has just fallen to GoPros. So he's a huge fan of Gas Burn Away. So like Irreversible, you know, Enter the Void, these were like very important films for us, both young or as young adults making films. So it was a huge inspiration on him for this. And he also, in a movie where he has to star, he was going to have to relinquish the camera. And he's also a big fan of operating on his films. So it was also like a selfish chance to be like, well, no, the camera's on my body, so I'm gonna, you know, I'm gonna be the one that does this. And then also he will contort his body or spin himself or throw himself into something as fast as possible. So he knew that if he wanted the shots to look as intense as he was hoping they would be, that it would have to be him in the suit. So I think all of that rolled together, and Joe's just a big fan of POV rigs now. You know, this was the same body rig. We started it on this movie, but then we brought it to Christmas Bloody Christmas for the Santa Vision. So it's like the same rig on both movies. And Joe got the chance to play around with it in a different film as well. But it actually, what's funny is that it actually debuted first in this movie. It's just this movie came out years after.
Yeah, one of the joys of doing a movie with Joe is that he only wants to shoot on film now, and he's using these rigs, whether they're invented or he likes to maximize camera movement with clever rigs, and he's using things that people don't use much anymore. You know, on Bliss, that we had the doggy cam, which is this like rig that attaches the camera to the body but extended like out from your body, and it gives this very weird perspective. This rig that he wore for the POV, and this was basically invented between him, kind of all of us chipped in on it. It was him and our camera first AC, Brian Dutton. Yeah. And so one thing that's fascinating with that is it's this it's a vest he's wearing, and the camera's attached up here. The lens is here. It's not in front of his face. It's here because the camera is here. And so one of the things I was so impressed with when Joe was wearing the rig and doing the POV stuff is he had to do everything as though his vision was here because the lens is here. So when he's taking a sip of alcohol, he's not here, it's here. And he's just dumping the alcohol on his shoulder, like Robert Hayes in Airplane. He's just dumping it on him. Or when he's smoking from the joint, he can't actually do it in his mouth. It's got to be under the lens, like it's right underneath his eyes. So we built every day was problem solving, trying to figure out, well, how are we going to do this thing? How are we going to do this thing? And so we took plastic bendy straws and just made a little tunnel of plastic bendy straws where he could put the joint into one end under the lens and suck it in with the other end of the straw here. And then when he blew out, it worked perfectly.
Yeah, we literally just walked up the street to a grocery store at the end of the street, bought bendy straws, took my knife, cut it, slid them over each other, taped them. We would tie it off to the camera so we could lean into it almost like a harmonicist would, like in and out of their harmonica during a song. And so you're sitting there like peeking around the corner watching Joe shoot, and he's smoking weed through a straw and then just dumping whiskey on his shoulder. And it's like, I can't believe that this is a movie we're all making. This is incredible.
It's just incredible. Yeah. I mean, it's really, that's what's so fun about it is coming up with these solutions like that. And it's a real joy to do that. It's all part of the fun of the process.
This movie made me feel claustrophobic in a way that I didn't know film could. That it's almost kind of like bookended by those POV shots, but like also the use of the black light and the neon colors and the way that the camera's fluidity moves throughout everything. When you guys were talking about really defining shots and what would ultimately kind of be used in this finality, at what point did those conversations about camera fluidity and the way that it moves like fast cuts, almost sometimes like early 2000s movies, also late 90s movies. Like this movie kind of felt like the more it went on, the more it kind of felt like a psychedelic whiplash. And I'm kind of curious if you guys can speak on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Joe's involvement with me as his editor, when we were young, we would make these various like experimental horror shorts together, and they were like jagged, hard cuts and inserts and flashes of violence and blood and all this kind of stuff. And I think when we made our first two movies, Joe tried to step away from that a little bit. He was like, I got to be like a real filmmaker. We were very young. He was 24 when we made our first movie. And so Almost Human was almost like his riff on like a Carpenter film. And then Mind's Eye was like, it's Carpenter and it's Cronenberg and it's all these different kind of things. And I think after those two films, he just found that he was having a hard time getting things funded because things had sort of slowed down for a bit. He had some things in his personal life that took precedence for a little while. So he wrote Bliss as this, like, an artist who can't create, someone who's blocked either financially or through their own sort of like artist block, and they'll do anything to just make something. So that was like born right out of his like heart and soul. And I think that's why that movie connected with people so much more than our first two films, was that it felt like for the first time he was making something that felt like it was really coming from him. And I think he's been pushing that further on all the other movies we made up to this point, where this is his most personal movie. So I think all of that energy and that Joe vibe, that was always intended to be there, and it was intended to be there as thickly as possible, and especially being in a small room on wide angle lenses with just two actors, with inserts, flash cuts of 8mm, all that stuff. We were doing anything we could to keep the whole movie at an 11 for as long as we could. There's only a couple of moments where the film really slows down and just like the lights come up and you're on Joe for just like 45 seconds to a minute before you're thrown back into a maelstrom of hell. And that was 100% by design. If ever we were putting things together and things started to feel stagnant, Joe would be like, we got to go back. We'll shoot another side. We'll get to that shot quicker. We'll have this insert. I'll go grab my 8mm camera. We'll shoot some inserts like JFK and we'll sound design him. And so it was just like a constantly live process where he was able to shoot stuff I'd put it together. We would talk about it. He would be like, cool, I think I'm going to do this. Then he would go shoot that, bring it back. We'd put it together and he'd go, great, this is awesome. Okay, let's do some more of that in the other scene. And it was just like constantly one-upping and stepping up. So I think it's something that Joe just loves maximalism. You know, lots of movies are about subtext. And they're about like what's not being said. And Joe's movies are like, nope, this is what's being said and this is what you're being shown. And it's like a thrill ride. It's almost like, you know, I likened it to like Weapons, which came out this week. It was like, it's just a blast front to back. And I think Joe seeks to create those same sort of like experiential movies where like you're just giving yourself up to the screen, be it a movie screen or a TV screen at home, and you're just like going along for a ride. So all of that was by design and part of the process from the beginning.
Yeah, it's cool you brought up. Not many people have brought up the claustrophobia, and I'm glad you felt that because I think by design too, you know, Josh was really just talking about all the technique that Joe uses with the rigs we were talking about. But I think there were different versions of the beginning of this movie. The first, not the POV at the beginning, but after that, after he wakes up after the first abduction. When we had reshot some of that, Joe was very specific about making a lot of those shots magic hour, like at sunset. And so you could see the light coming in the apartment through the open windows when he's doing the research during the montage and drinking and trying to call my character. It really makes the place feel more open. And then as soon as the aliens arrive, you know, I arrive, we start to argue, and then the aliens trap us in there. And as soon as those brick walls go up, the black brick that the aliens put up, it really does become, you know, it's like night and day. I think it becomes suddenly so much more claustrophobic with that too. And like Josh was saying, once the wide angle lenses go on and you're just in our faces the whole time and it keeps getting closer and closer, it just has that effect. And a lot of that, I think it's just Joe's instinct too. Or maybe not instinct, maybe like intuition or instinct. I don't know which one it is, but he just can feel what's right for the scene and how to keep it, like Josh was saying, how to keep it moving and make it just a blast a minute, you know?
Fear and Loathing in Joe's Apartment.
That's it. That was the movie we watched. Fear and Loathing was a big influence on this, for sure. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas was a huge influence.
The way the movie comes across, you always hear stories of like scenes and little snippets of movies that were like ad-libbed. It comes across like there might have been a lot of that during the shooting process. Is that how it was, or was it all laid out? This is how we want to do it. This is the story and everything. How much of it was planned and how much of it was just on the spot off the top of the head?
There was a script. There were lines written. The general way it was approached was we would come in and rehearse it and not for the lines, but to get the beats. Joe and I would figure out where things needed to happen and what information needed to get out. And then generally the script was tossed out. So it was largely improvised. I think there's one or two scenes where we stuck pretty close to the script, which is the end of the long sort of They Live style fight scene where we're beating each other with alien corpses. And then the spoiler alert. And then the other scene is when I'm telling, we're kind of pouring it out to each other. I've just told him about these weird images that have come out of the printer, and we have our final like big fight before the crap really hits the fan. Like we have this big fight. And I think a lot of that we actually stuck to the script because it was important to get how Jimmy and Stiggs really feel about each other was really in the lines. So that was pretty close. Otherwise, every other scene, it was our own colloquial way of doing it, and we would rehearse it, and Joe would actually get upset with me. He's like, you're sticking to the script too closely. I was like, you wrote this, man. I figured that's what you'd want. And you're like, no, just toss it. Just key off of what I'm saying. Just react to what I'm saying. And Joe's, you know, always screaming and playing it at an 11, and I'm coming in like trying to give it some peaks and valleys. So we kind of had to figure out how to match each other's energy, you know. But it was your instinct is correct. It was very improvised within a structure, structurally improvised.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of times actors and everybody have like certain scenes that they like the most that they did in a movie. Do you have one without spoiling too much?
For me, it was actually that scene I was just talking about. I really like, I mean, some of this is Josh's editing, the way he cut it. Because Joe and I both were taking huge swings on performance. We were really going big, but I really like that scene where he is trying to get to the room to investigate where these printouts are coming from, and I am trying to keep him in my eyesight because I don't know if he's human or not, which has been, one of my favorite things about playing Stiggs is I have a really fun arc to play. I start in a very toned down, kind of low key place, kind of a stodgy guy who's trying not to be a party animal drunk anymore. And through the course of the movie, I become Dennis Hopper in Apocalypse Now. I'm not comparing myself to that performance, but I'm saying that's where I got to kind of go with it, or try to go. And I think that scene in particular, where I am telling him why our friendship fell apart, and I'm telling him that he's a zero, and that nobody wants to go down with the sinking ship that he is.
The SS Jimbo.
The SS Jimbo. And we're all going down with the SS Jimbo. That was just, we really got to a place in that scene that we were just locked in, and it felt good. And I think it came off really good. I shudder to think what Josh had to go through to cut it, because we were on top of each other with the lines. And when you're coming at each other in that way, it's very hard to edit because the audio is just right.
Oh, I would say the bigger thing was whenever they wanted to improvise, they'd be like, cool, we got to hit these 3 beats. And it was like, sometimes the first beat was the third beat. Sometimes the second beat was the first beat. And then they would also try to remember, oh, that's right, we got to get to number 2. So they would transition to number 2. And then you're using that take. It's like, but I already got number 2 out of the way. So now I can't use this take anymore. But also Joe was here with me, and he would be like, oh, okay, yeah, I see why that's doing that now, which is why the opening scene between the two of them basically became a oneer. So that way you're just in one take. You don't need to worry about matching it with anything else. You just whip from Matt, whip to Joe, whip from Matt, whip to Joe. And I think that scene's fantastic. I love the way it plays now. It plays so natural. That's what it's like to go over Joe's house and have him yell at you. That's what it's like.
Yeah. And Joe's not an actor. I have been acting for a while, but Joe's not an actor, and I think he did a great job with this. He really, really has an intensity and a physical performance that is really hard to do. He had an injury a few years ago with his back, and some of the stuff he was doing in this, I was like, please don't re-injure your back. I mean, when he's throwing himself over the table, there's no budget for a stunt coordinator. We're just doing all of this. He was really throwing himself over a table and rolling around on the floor. I ran through a door, like a real door from Lowe's that we got. So, I mean, we're all just doing this stuff. And, but I think in particular, Joe's physical performance is very in that sort of Bruce Campbell-y kind of vibe, like Evil Dead 2. He's really doing all this stuff and with abandon.
Yeah, it's like if Bruce Campbell was on coke and also really pissed off.
Yeah.
It's like that's kind of what.
So normal Bruce Campbell.
Yeah,
Bruce normal Bruce. Yeah, right. Yeah, just channeling that normal Bruce Campbell.
So if y'all were shooting all this in his apartment, how many neighbors did y'all piss off?
That was going to be my question too.
0. We had no problem with anybody. All of Joe's neighbors, and I used to live with them in that building. I lived there for 5 or 6 years with them, and the people are awesome. They're great, and we would throw parties. We would have house parties. We would have holiday parties or cookouts, all this stuff, and nobody ever complained. So when Joe just started shooting a movie, it was like, "Oh, you guys had a pretty big party last night." We're like, "Yeah." So nobody ever complained. In fact, one of the guys who lives below him, who's a friend, he's a really nice guy. He was just like, yeah, it sounds like you guys are really getting into it. And what he's talking about is Joe stomping up and down a hallway with a chainsaw, yelling, "I'm gonna fucking kill you, you melon-headed fucks." You heard him shouting about murdering somebody, and he didn't call the cops. You're like, oh, it must be a hell of a party. So yeah, it's like,
yeah, right.
It's surprising. No cops, no neighbors upset, no weird things from the manager or the owner. I think he might have gotten one text from the owner of the building that was like, "Yeah, I know you got the art project going on, but
the art project,
try not to get all that orange stuff on the sidewalk." That's like,
yeah.
So
yeah,
it's great,
yeah,
right? Unbelievable that we got away with it. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I feel bad though if you live on Joe's block, because if you actually are in trouble and getting attacked by someone with a chainsaw or any other implement, they're just going to think it's a movie being shot.
Yeah.
No one's going to call the police.
That's just Joe again.
Yeah.
So I'll go ahead and cap us off with one final question. Just kind of going into the space, but also some of the things that you had talked about, Matt, just a few minutes ago. This movie has a very physical demand to it. And obviously with it being a small production and small teams, can you guys talk about finding the grooves of choreography in terms of fight, but also with the practical effects and kind of how the challenges that may have arisen there?
Yeah, I mean, the fights with the aliens and the fight between me and Joe was very physical. And, we've been doing this for a while, making these small movies, and sometimes you have a stunt coordinator, sometimes you don't, but we have enough experience to know how to line up a punch so that it is stacked and looks real, but you're not going to hurt anybody. I was talking before, like we were really flippant about all of these things, throwing ourselves around, but we are careful about it to a degree. But I think one of the other challenges in the movie, and I don't think I talked about this yet, is the aliens are puppets essentially, and they each have a different thing that they do. You may have already talked about this, Josh, but one wraps around you. A lot of them are for throwing around, getting beat up, and they're mostly marionettes. Basically, they have monofilament on them, and you're operating them like a puppet. And then there's specialty ones that have animatronics, whether it's a moving hand or a mouth or whatever. But they're puppets, and so I think one of the other challenges is making it look like it's an organic thing sometimes when you're fighting it. I think I was never that cognizant of it or thinking of it as a challenge, but there are scenes where you have to make it look like it is physically attacking you when really it's a dead piece of rubber. There's a scene in particular where one is clawing at my face, and I was moving the arm back and forth like I was struggling to keep it from grabbing my face, but it's just me moving the arm. I mean, it's like playtime when you're a kid. It's like that's what you're doing. But between the right sort of physical movement and then the right cutting, which obviously Josh did and benefited us greatly, it has an authenticity to it. It makes it feel like you're really fighting an organic thing, and sound effects really plays into that too. Again, Joe's a great physical actor. The first scene where he fights an alien and he's punching it and rolling over the desk with it, all of these things come together to really sell it, and I think that is a lot of it.
I think also Joe and I have a history of making movies that feature gags, like even on Almost Human, which Joe will happily admit, like not his strongest writing. Although I think it's a lot of fun for that reason. It feels very like regional horror for that reason. But the gags in that movie, because I've rewatched it recently, my wife actually hadn't seen it. I said, let's throw this in. The gags in it are so fun. And they still work because they're built off those tenets of practical effects and like cinematography and cutting and sound. And like you use all that stuff to try to sell something as best you can. And I think Joe has just carried that forward with him through all of his films and tried to consistently do gags, knowing like, okay, this one is going to be like, for instance, Jeremy Gardner getting an axe in his face, and Mind's Eye was like an axe on a mount where the camera gets pulled across the room, and then like camera goes behind the axe and we rack focus to Jeremy, and like then it was like 4 or 5 people standing there, and one pulls an axe like this, another one pulls the head side to side, and the other one makes sure that the cabinet behind us doesn't fall over on all 4 of us. And it's like it's just like an orchestration of effects and creatives and artisans. And so I think when we went to go make this movie, we knew sort of what was required as far as like how to sell things, how to sell violence, how to sell the alien movement as best as possible. Joe was just like smashing himself in the face with an alien and like trying to make it look as real as he possibly could. And then you add in, thankfully our buddy Josh Miller did the alien sound effects, and he would do live performance after it was cut together. And I can't even do a version of it because he does it so perfectly. But once we had the sound of the aliens there, the actual vocal performance of them with the sound of a wet, slimy headbutt, and it all just worked, and it was so fun. And it's so ridiculous that Joe's idea of a pandemic movie was basically a movie where 2 of my best friends are just fighting Muppets the whole time.
Yeah. I think yeah, Miller's vocal performances for the aliens is maybe my favorite thing in the movie. I love the vocalizations of the aliens.
It reminds me of that great quote where someone was like, why is, A Muppet Christmas Carol so good? And it's like, because, Michael Caine is treating his Muppet co-stars as actors. And then it's like, oh, but then like the Treasure Island, it's like, and then like Tim Curry is treating himself like a Muppet. And so when Joe and Matt made this movie and they were in scenes with the puppets and with the aliens, they just treated it as though my whole body has to be doing the thing that they're doing so that it's like completely believable and sellable. And honestly, it felt silly a lot of times on set, but then when you watch the movie, it's just, honestly, it's a really good time. I wish more people were making stuff that was just totally aimed at being fun and not necessarily being like trauma driven, or like we're going to make it, dark, and everything has to be like, like seeped in it. And Joe's just like, I just want everything to be like a Motorhead concert in 1979.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. There's nothing like shanking an alien with its own bone. That was fun. A fun time.
Well,
That's my favorite
audiences,
kill in the movie right there.
audiences will be able to get to experience it thanks to iconic events. We'll provide links for you guys in the show notes below. But you two gentlemen, where can people find you guys online, and where can we find the film?
Yeah, I'm at Mercer Shark on Instagram. That's probably the best place to find me. And the film is in wide release August 15th. It'll be in a lot of different movie theaters, AMC's, Regal's, Malco's, like you were saying. I didn't even know that. Thanks to the horror section and Iconic.
Yeah.
Check your local listings, as they used to say.
And Iconic and the horror section have both been running like a Jimmy and Stiggs account on Instagram. I think it's just at Jimmy and Stiggs, with lots of great like behind the scenes and footage of Joe while he's been on the road show. I'm personally just my name at Josh Heath here. I don't have anything fun like a shark to throw on mine. And I'm on Instagram, at least. I was on Twitter before it burned down. So
you should add a shark. Add a shark.
I should
make a bad choice early in your
Shark
social media
Heath here.
days and add a shark.
Can you imagine if your first AIM screen name had to be your Instagram handle now?
Oh,
We'd all get off the internet.
No problem.
all right, I'm gonna cut it